By now, it's pretty obvious that I love roller coasters. There are so many different kinds out there to ride and enjoy, and I just can't get enough of them. But every now and then, I come across a coaster that I don't wish to ride again. In the grand scheme of things, there aren't really that many coasters that I'd consider to be bad. But still, here are the top 10 worst roller coasters I've ever ridden. Just a quick disclaimer though, I mean absolutely no disrespect to any manufacturers or parks with this video. This is just a combination of my honest thoughts mixed in with some comedic hyperbole, so please don't take what I'm about to say too seriously. Number 10 is the Runaway Mine Train at Six Flags Great Adventure. I understand that this is the oldest coaster still operating at the park, but it certainly doesn't hold up nowadays. Don't get me wrong, just because a coaster is old doesn't mean it's bad. I've ridden other Aero mine trains like Carolina Gold Rusher and Adventure Express, and I really enjoyed those. With Runaway Mine Train though, it is such a rough ride that you can't even appreciate the admittedly impressive scenery around it. This coaster has such a beautiful setting, and it's really too bad that it's as rough as it is. If they can somehow manage to retrack this, then it could very well be my favorite mine train, but for now, I just prefer to avoid it. Number 9 is the Flying Ace Aerial Chase at Carowinds. Now, I'm not including kiddie coasters on this list, but I consider this to be more of a family coaster than a kiddie coaster. And I really don't think that family coasters are supposed to have this much headbanging. At least with the one at Kings Island, there's some extra padding on the over-the-shoulder restraints. But here, the restraints are much harder, making this coaster much less bearable to sit through. At this point, I'd consider tearing it down and building a newer Vekoma suspended family coaster, something like Freedom Flyer at Fun Spot Orlando, because honestly, Snoopy deserves a much more enjoyable coaster. Number 8 is the Canopy Corkscrew at Canopy Lake Park. Once again, I'm not saying that old roller coasters are bad, however, there's a difference between vintage and outdated. Vintage is something like Yankee Cannonball in the same park. This is an old wooden coaster from the 1930s that still manages to give great rides after over 80 years. Outdated is something like the Aero Corkscrew model, something you don't want to revisit. Furthermore, I understand that the Aero Corkscrew was the first steel coaster model to go upside down, and that it has a major historical significance. But in my opinion, they just aren't fun rides. The layout is just a drop, a double corkscrew, and that's pretty much it. And after being relocated twice, it's naturally going to give a pretty rough ride. Even though I respect what this model did for the industry, I'd rather not re-ride it. Number 7 is Wildcat at Hershey Park. I understand that this ride has its fans, and many of whom have reached out to me to say that this does give good rides every now and then. However, after the awful experience I had in the front row of all places, I am hesitant to give it another shot. This was the first roller coaster built by GCI, and while it does look impressive on the surface, it's clear that the company has substantially improved over the years. I've loved every other GCI I've ridden, but I'd much rather see this one get the RMC treatment or even a retracking. Either one of these options is bound to provide a better ride than what we have now. Number 6 is another Wildcat, this time at Lake Compounce. Even though I have fond memories of riding this coaster when I was younger, it certainly didn't hold up when I rode it last year. Unlike Yankee Cannonball, it hasn't aged well at all, and the ride is both insanely rough and headache inducing as well. Now, I didn't get to re-ride it after the controversial retracking this year, and I know the park is doing even more work on it before next season. From what I've heard, in the brief period that it was open this year, it got insanely negative reviews from enthusiasts, many even saying that it was even worse than before. So hopefully when it does reopen, it will be a lot better than it was when I rode it last year. Number 5 is Vortex at Carowinds. Let me start by saying that I love B&M. Unfortunately, this is the only coaster they made that I flat out detested. I even like Green Lantern, and that's a stand-up coaster too. With Vortex though, you're bound to be punished with non-stop headbanging, which is even worse on a stand-up coaster. The layout is extremely short and incredibly bland, and even if they converted this into a floorless coaster, I doubt it would be any more exciting. B&M has unquestionably improved since their first stand-up coaster models. Number 4 is Superflight at Rye, New York's Playland Park. You know how I always say you can never go wrong with the B&M Hyper? Well, in this case, you can easily go wrong with the Zamperla Volare. This bizarre flying coaster seats 4 riders per train in a strange metal and plastic cage. And if you ever wonder what it feels like to be a lab rat in an earthquake, I guess this coaster is right up your alley. None of the inversions feel exciting, and you constantly feel like the ride is going to fall apart throughout the entire layout. It was just an immensely uncomfortable experience. However, this Volare still gives a better ride than number 3, Soarin Eagle at Coney Island's Scream Zone. I guess I didn't expect too much out of this ride, but I never thought that I would experience this much discomfort. It is twice as rough as Superflight and feels 3 times as unstable. I don't think I've ever felt less secure riding a roller coaster than I did on this. this. I'm not saying that this is an unsafe coaster, it just gives off that kind of feeling. Number 2 is Goliath at Six Flags New England. No. Just no. Ever since it got new trains, this coaster has been a consistently unbearable experience. As good as it is to look at, getting in line for this coaster is basically the equivalent of being sent to the gallows, especially if you get put in the back row. After an admittedly exciting first drop, it's all downhill from there. From then on out, your head will ricochet back and forth on the restraints like a pinball, and you'll be forced to endure its 3 painful inversions both forwards and backwards. You wouldn't wish this coaster on your worst enemy. And now we've come to number 1, the Great American Scream Machine at Six Flags Great Adventure. And this coaster, I don't think I can put into words how dreadful it was. But you know what? I'm gonna do it anyway. This may have closed over 7 years ago, but I still remember to this day my fateful ride on it at age 13. It was a beautiful day, and I convinced my father to ride this with me. I was won over by its impressive looking inversions and was very excited to go upside down so many times. But from the moment we left that lift hill, my poor adolescent head was continuously slammed side to side on those horrendous Aero Mega Looper restraints. By the time I got off this ride, I had a horrible migraine and an awful throbbing in my ears. I will never forget it, and I did not care at all when this closed. Now with that being said, I do respect what this coaster did for Great Adventure. When it first opened, it drew so many crowds that one could easily argue that Great Adventure wouldn't be what it is today without it. It's quite possible that if it wasn't for this coaster, we wouldn't have Nitro or El Toro. It is an important part of the park's history, but it sucked. Thanks for watching, everyone. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow me on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or you can check out my website at themeparkcrazy.com. This is Theme Park Crazy, and I'll see you all next time.